Conduit, Kitsap County, 49 degrees. Getting a little chilly out there. I believe there may be a potential snow in the forecast next week. I think it was about 45% chance. So keep an eye on the weather, which I think is appropriate for our conversation today. But this is our conversation of housing and concerns. And every second Wednesday, we do our deep dive, and that is our time. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our fine folks up. The first one is Katie Sharp. Katie, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm great. I'm just happy to be here on the Wednesday. It's the weather's been turning. The sun is out, so that's always good.
It is good. Well, I'm glad that you're here today with us. The next person up is Matt Garrett. Matt, how you doing?
Good to be here, Marwan. Thanks for having me.
All right. And last, but certainly not least, one of the busiest people in the entire county, Kirsten Jewell. Kirsten, how are you?
I'm great. It's another great day.
Kirsten, how do you feel about that title, the busiest person in Kitsap County? I think you're probably up there for it.
Well, it's hard to compare oneself to others because I don't really know anybody else's experience, but I definitely feel very yeah.
Well, speaking as one who interacts with a lot of different individuals here in this county, I would say that you're probably top 10 for sure. Easily.
Well, we could go off and have a whole nother conversation about why it is that our culture kind of holds up people who are super busy with work things as something to compliment or be complimentary about. It's kind of a funny place we end up in our society, but I will take that in the spirit that I know that it was intended, which is complimentary. So thank you.
No, it truly is. And the need is so great. And you are answering the call every day.
That is very true, as are all of you. So I am in good company and grateful that you're providing this platform and this opportunity for us to have these conversations and share this information with the larger community.
We'll hit the horn for that. All right. Well, let's jump right in. We've got a tight schedule today. Let's go right with our updates. And since we have Katie right above me, Katie, why don't we start with you? It's like the Brady Bunch.
Oh, I don't know. I might be light on the updates today. I always like to focus on the deep dive on these Tuesday or Wednesdays, and just let everyone know we're looking at options to roll out some notifications while we're still trying to implement Rent Cafe and things, and how we can better notify our residents, our participants, the public of what we're up to, the board. So there's always things in the works. Lots of things going on right now, but I don't know if I have any specific updates. I would like to say though that the Kitsap Housing and Homelessness Coalition meeting is next week. So that's always a good place to get information about services, especially if you have any immediate needs or something to share. It's always great to join that meeting. So if you want to put the URL up on the screen for the Housing and Homelessness Coalition, I'm always supportive of getting more members in those meetings to talk about the services available and what we're up to.
Absolutely. And yes, I will pop that up on the screen. Matt, why don't we come to you?
Yeah, I think like Katie, we did a good job last week of getting in the updates on RAP and talked about Mills Crossing. And so I think, let me not take too much time away from our deep dive. And I think we can jump right in since we gave a lot of good. So I'll refer folks to our last show. That's where we talked about a lot of what's happening. I think maybe next week we'll have a few more updates. But let's talk about severe weather shelters. And I'm happy to answer any questions if those comes up about KCR. But I think we're good on updates here, though.
All right. And Kirsten, any updates from the county?
Where to start? You know what? Like the others, I think I think most of the updates I've either given recently or will be giving again next week at the Housing and Homelessness Coalition meeting. So it always feels like we don't have enough time. So let's just dive in on, on severe weather shelters. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of awesome side opportunities to chat as well about things that kind of come up as additional questions in the context of that conversation. So,
All right, I like it.
oh,
So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and put the link for the severe weather shelter and just the webpage there so folks can see here quickly. And let's get into it. So again, you can get to the website, kitsap.gov. If you type in severe weather shelter in your URL, it should come right up. Sometimes you could type Kitsap in there and that'll pop up even easier. But that's how I do it to find it. And then after that, you can just bookmark it and then you got it. So let's jump into our discussion there. So let's start off maybe with you, Kirsten. Can you talk about, what is the severe weather shelter? How did it come to be?
absolutely. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about the history, and I have to go get in the Wayback Machine here. My recollection is that the severe weather shelter program originated with a committee of people that was sort of spearheaded by Sally Santana, who's one of our longtime, sadly now past heroes of homelessness in Kitsap County. And she worked with the Housing and Homelessness Coalition, which was called the Continuum of Care at that time, to develop an outdoor homeless committee that was specifically working to come up with solutions for people who weren't in shelter and were struggling with surviving outside. Out of that committee came an initiative to have the first severe weather shelter, which I believe was hosted at Bremerton Food Line in Bremerton, which was a food bank, not designed. The building wasn't intended to be a shelter, but they were willing to answer the call for that need in the community. And they approached the county about this issue, and we developed a relationship whereby the Department of Emergency Management was involved in helping qualify volunteers and kind of oversee the government end of the severe weather shelter program. That went on for a couple of years, and then when the Bremerton Salvation Army completed their beautiful new addition to their facility, there was a idea to maybe move the severe weather shelter into that building instead of the food line, where people were basically sleeping in the aisles between, at the food bank. And so the Salvation Army graciously agreed to host it. And it was a very successful program at the Salvation Army for a couple of years. And then a group from, I believe it was Port Orchard, a church from Port Orchard approached us and said they were interested in having a severe weather shelter in Port Orchard as well. And so we sort of spun up a second severe weather shelter, and then subsequently a group in Silverdale said the same thing, and then a group in Kingston said the same thing. So we've sort of added severe weather shelters over the course of the last, 5 or 6 years now. Actually, add 3 years for the pandemic, so that'd be 8 years. The severe weather shelter programs are a really unique program in our county and in other counties, across other counties as well. They are 100% volunteer led and run and operated. It's a partnership between the county Human Services Department, which is the department the division that I work with, the Housing and Homelessness Division, the Department of Emergency Management at Kitsap County, and each one of the individual that hosts and sponsors the severe weather shelter in their community. So the Department of Emergency Management is the one that their part in the partnership is that they take the volunteer applications, they vet them, they do background checks, and each person who volunteers for the severe weather shelter becomes what is called a state emergency worker. And they have, as part of that state emergency worker program, they are covered under the state emergency insurance. So if anything were to happen to one of the volunteers while they're serving a shift at the severe weather shelter, they're covered under the state emergency worker insurance. They also do a lot of the advertising for us, and they're the ones that make the determination about when the weather has met criteria to activate the shelter. The county, our role, the Housing and Homelessness Division's role, is that we provide a lot of the coordination of efforts between the four severe weather shelter sites. We help provide sort of backbone support for the scheduling of those shelters, and we also, have a website. We help recruit volunteers. We're sort of like the coordinating entity, if you will, between the different programs. And then the four individual programs, their responsibility is to secure a location, make an agreement with that location that they can use it, develop their own individual operating procedures for that particular location, recruit volunteers, train volunteers on their location, and then do the scheduling for the severe weather shelters when they're activated. I'm sure I've forgotten some things here, but that's roughly the way that the partnerships work. The way the activations work is that when the weather meets certain criteria, and that criteria includes being below freezing overnight, an inch or more, I think it's an inch or more of snow on the ground or overnight. I think it's excessive rain can trigger an activation, or high winds, so a high wind warning. So the Department of Emergency Management monitors the weather, and twice a week they send out an update to the county, to Housing and Human Homelessness Division, saying it looks like the weather is going to meet criteria or not meet criteria for tonight, for the next couple of days. If we do meet criteria, then our staff immediately reaches out to all the severe weather shelter managers and says, we're going to meet criteria tonight. Please get back to us by 11 o'clock if you have enough volunteers to staff the shelter for tonight. So they immediately turn around and go out, put a call out, hey, we need volunteers for tonight. If we know it's going to be activated for the next couple of nights, they also recruit for the next couple of nights. And then they get back to us and say, yes, we have volunteers. And then we let DEM know, and we all start advertising the fact that the shelters are open. So it's quite an amazing effort, and it's quite cool that it's 100% volunteer run. I'm sure we'll have more conversation. There's a lot more I can share about it, and I do have some recent statistics to share also.
Well, before you jump into this,
and answer questions or respond to comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love statistics. Katie and Matt, just kind of hearing some of the history. I don't know how much you knew about that. You just give us some comment on that. And what is Bremerton Housing Authority, or KCR's, relationship with the severe weather shelters, if there is a connection there?
Well, from my perspective, a lot of what I've learned about the severe weather shelters came from Kirsten, from all the information we received, and I know you talk about it a lot too, and I signed up for the texts last year, so I always get the texts when they're open, which is really helpful. I know sometimes it's mentioned, there's no Bremerton location, and I know that has to do with the Bremerton or the Salvation Army having an overnight shelter all the time. So that's always catches people's attention, but it's interesting to think what the Salvation Army was doing for emergency shelter and now what it does and then what it will do in the future. So that's always interesting to me because from face value it may look different, but there's a lot of hands working to help. So.
And thanks, Katie. I think I misspoke and said something incorrectly. So I want to just clean that up and try to clarify. So as Katie alluded to, over time, the Bremerton Severe Weather Shelter kind of morphed into an every night winter shelter. Operated an every night winter shelter for the last 3 or 4 years before the pandemic. So the 4th severe weather shelter site is actually in Paulsbo. So we've got Kingston, Paulsbo, Silverdale, and Port Orchard are the only open when the weather meets the severe weather criteria. Bremerton had kind of an all winter from typically December 1st to March 31st severe weather, winter shelter that was open. Now, obviously during the pandemic, the Bremerton Salvation Army graciously agreed to stay open every night, all night, 365 days a year for the last 3 years they've been operating. And so we haven't needed, per se, a severe weather shelter in Bremerton for the last few years because we've had the Salvation Army doing that incredible work. So thank you for helping me realize that I had misspoken.
And Matt, what are your thoughts, and then the relationship that KCR has with the Severe Weather Shelter Program?
Yeah, well, Kirsten, thanks for the history. I love Kirsten's History Corner. I feel like that could be a show on its own where we learn the history of Kitsap County, especially with regards to housing homeless services. So that's awesome. Kudos to all the volunteers, and I know in the management too. I know Kirsten, Corey, and a lot of folks at the county do a lot of work to kind of organize this, and the volunteers. It really is a cool effort. And Kirsten, correct me if I'm wrong, but Washington State deserves some credit as well, because I believe their emergency management or their emergency worker insurance program is somewhat unique. I don't think all states cover volunteers like that. And so to be able to actually offer some liability that helps other, smaller organizations and churches, right? Like, house this and operate this. So I think there's a lot of folks involved in this that get a lot of credit to operate something, basically without really a budget. So tremendous gratitude and kudos. And it is used, quite frequently. And I would love to hear some statistics. But as far as our involvement, so being Housing Solutions Center is coordinated entry. So our job is to slot folks with housing options. That includes shelter, rapid rehousing, transitional, but emergency shelter is a key piece of that. And so we have active relationships with all the active shelters, like Kirsten was talking about, Salvation Army, Rescue Mission, Georgia's House, St. Vincent de Paul, and so on. But the severe weather shelters are then included when they're activated. So our team gets the texts and we get the emails, and then we're talking to folks and letting them know, and then sometimes arranging or helping them get transportation to go out there. So that's kind of our role as coordinated entries, to make sure that anyone that we're working with, either an outreach team, either our navigators that are in the building, or even the case managers that have clients that are experiencing homelessness, to make sure that they know. So we always blast out, make sure all our staff know, and then any client that comes in contact during that time with coordinated entry is given the option that the severe weather shelter is open. And that might be bus tokens to help get them there. Or Marwan, I believe you all help support rides to severe weather. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes, that is
so I
correct.
think that's, yeah. So hopefully you could talk a little bit more about that in a second. But that's where we see our role as communication, and then helping facilitate access, and then referring folks into severe weather shelter when it's open. And the communication is really good. So that system is awesome. I feel like the emails and texts and go out pretty early, and usually do give us some time to kind of let folks know out there, especially for something that's like having, I think anyone that's worked with volunteers know how hard it is to wrangle volunteers. Like for any project, let alone with a timeline and like a really quick, turnaround for overnight. So that's a big process, and so I think it's amazing how quickly we're able to get that information out, and I think most of the time they get used, and sometimes if they don't have people that show up, they'll close down. But yeah, I would love to hear some more statistics, and that's kind of where we are at. And it's an awesome, amazing program, and everyone involved gets a lot of credit for it.
Thanks, Matt. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that you said. So you heard Katie and Matt talk about getting the texts. What that means is that a few years ago, we recognized that one of the biggest challenges for the program is for people who might want to go to the severe weather shelter to find out the nights that it's open, because one of the big challenges is that it's not consistently open, right? It might be open these 2 days, but not this day. And, so it's kind of difficult. So we set up a text line where you can sign up to get text alerts every time the severe weather shelter is open. And that anybody can get that, as Katie and Matt said, they're on the text alert line. You don't have to be a person who is unhoused or looking for shelter. It's something that's really helpful to just get those notifications, and anybody's welcome to sign up. And on the web page, as Marwan is highlighting on the screen, you can text to Kitsap SWS, or you text Kitsap SWS to the number, and then that'll sign you up to get those electronic alerts. I'm seeing that Jeff had a question in the chat about when people are excluded from the Salvation Army, are they able to the severe weather shelters? I don't know your question, Jeff, because one of the features of the severe weather shelter is that it's really, we consider it to be a life-saving program. And as part of that, we don't ask a lot of questions of people. We do have people sign in, so we know who's there, but we don't track it. We don't bar people as long as they can behave themselves. There's very low requirements for entry. All we're doing is providing you with a safe, warm place to sleep at night. So anybody, even if somebody had been, not able to be in one of the other shelters, that wouldn't necessarily disqualify them from going and staying in one of the severe weather shelters. And we really try to get as many people as we can into those severe weather shelters. Having the HEART team, the Housing Solution Outreach team, the REAL team, Anton's group with Hospitality Northwest, they also get those text alerts. And then when they go out, they are able to tell people living outside, hey, it's going to be really cold tomorrow, tonight, this week, you should really get into one of the severe weather shelters, and here's where they are, and here's how to do that. The other piece that has been brought up is that during the first year of the pandemic, many of the severe weather shelters were not able to operate because they had restrictions on buildings that were closed. And so we weren't able to have all the severe weather shelters operating. So we were really concerned that people would be used to going to the Kingston site or the Silverdale site, and they would get there and there would be no severe weather shelter for them to stay at, and we would essentially be kind of stranding them there. So we contracted with Gather Together, Grow Together to provide transportation for people from those sort of shelter sites where there wasn't an active shelter to one of the ones that was open in Paulsbo or Port Orchard. That was extremely successful. And we've been able to continue to fund that transportation effort and even expand it. So we essentially have kind of a dial now where people can call the phone number that we provide that's advertised everywhere to call Gather Together, Grow Together. And almost always they're able to go and pick somebody up and take them to the nearest severe weather shelter. And then in the morning, they can return them back to where they picked them up. And I think that's really been dramatically helpful in increasing the availability of the severe weather shelters for people who might otherwise not be able to reach them due to transportation limitations. So we're really grateful to partner with Gather Together to Grow Together on that. And it's definitely increased, I think, the effectiveness of the program.
Kirsten, if I can jump in there, what I'll say to you, Jeff, is, for this is our third year providing, this service for the county. And as far as I know, we have never been called to take someone away from the shelter because they could not stay, right? In the 3 years, so we're going into our third year. So, and all the time we've been doing it, we've been just taking folks to the shelter and not taking them from the shelter because they couldn't stay. So, I hope that answers your question. Um, from
I think we have had one or two situations over the last 3 years where I think we had to call an ambulance once or twice when somebody was really sick, and they went to the hospital. I think they ended up coming back to the severe weather shelter after. Occasionally there is a behavior issue, and then we typically have to contact to help out with that. But for the most part, the programs run really smoothly, and people are grateful to have a place to stay warm and dry. And we try to connect them with resources on a limited basis while they're there, even though it is overnight, so it's kind of nothing's open. And but we try to make sure people are aware and try to get them to call Housing Solutions Center in the morning. There's a question from Jeff specifically asking if anyone this year living unhoused on Martin Luther King Way, and I don't know the answer to that. That's something that we can, you probably reach out to the coroner's office. They're really awesome about tracking that, and every year they actually have a memorial service for people who died and whose bodies were unclaimed, or people who were indigent. So definitely the coroner's office would have that information, but I do not.
The other thing that I was going to say in regards to providing the transportation, there's always something that you as a community can do when it opens. If you're getting those text alerts, let people know, get the word out, because we don't want anyone to be unhoused during these weather conditions. It's quite harsh, and the window isn't a long window, right? Kirsten, if you could kind of talk about that, right? When the weather conditions are determined that it can open, they have a very short window to find the volunteers to staff it and open the location, and then we have a few hours after that, once the alert goes out, to get the word out so that we can get everyone to the shelter by, I believe, 9 p.m. If that is correct, Kirsten. So the
Yeah, so
more
people can check in typically from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then, there's a safe overnight time. And then they have to, unfortunately, most of the shelters, they have to check out by, 7 in the morning. And that is really difficult. But the reason for that is that most of the buildings that are being used for the severe weather shelters overnight have daytime programming in them, and church or community center, there's stuff happening during the daytimes. And so they can only be open, in the night. So yeah, the big push is getting everybody checked in by 9 p.m. We also have an arrangement where law enforcement, if they find somebody outside, they can drop them off after hours. And that is allowed. So that happens occasionally as well. Sorry, my camera's very blurry right now. I'm not sure what's going on. So yeah, if law enforcement finds somebody hanging out outside and it's a freezing night, we want to get them inside. So we will take those folks after hours.
I'll just add to you on the death question. I think the question was probably more around maybe cold. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to expand on that. That it is a little tough to fully track. I do know from our any folks this year we've had a string. So there's about 11 clients that KCR was working with that have passed, about 10 just HSC or outreach, and then one that was actually case managed. But those are not necessarily like cold related. There's overdoses. There's all types of things that kind of go into that. So I think it's tough to parse out. So there, even just be careful of like parsing out what the cause of death was, because often there's medical and it gets a little complicated. But death is a part of this, and I just want to put in there that we do regularly have clients that pass, and that is one of the hardest things for our team to deal with, is dealing with clients that have passed that, you know, we've really worked hard to try to stabilize.
So I wanted to just talk a little bit about some statistics here. I think this is on the website. We just put out a new data summary for the 2022-2023 severe weather shelter season. But so far this year, our season runs from November 1st to March 31st. So any of the days in there is when we could potentially be activated. And this year so far, we've been, oh, that's a very old one, Marwan. I'm sorry if I don't know where the fresh one is, but we'll get it up there soon if it hasn't been put up yet. I'm assuming I can't share my screen, right?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Oh,
there's
okay,
a little square with an arrow.
Okay, a little square with an arrow.
Ooh, Kirsten's gonna share her screen. I love it.
Good luck though, Kirsten. I tried last week and it
didn't work.
I don't know if it did still. I never watched it back.
Okay, here. Sorry. Ooh, this is very fancy. Here we go. Let's try. You tell me if I've successfully shared.
You did. Here it goes. Okay.
So, as I said, this is very hot off the press and may not be on our website yet, but will be shortly. So far this year, we've had 28 days of activation, and I'm really proud to say that 96% of those nights, all of the 4 shelters were able to open. So sometimes they don't get enough volunteers, and they are one or more of the shelters isn't able to actually activate and be open. But this year we doing a really good job with those amazing volunteers signing up, and 96% of the time we had all of the 4 shelters open on those 28 days. You can see that most of the time it was due to temperature, but we did have that really big windstorm. I think that was that Christmas week that we activated for the huge high wind storm that was headed our way. So far this year, we've had 657 stays, which means that that sort of counts the number of people who've it's not a unique number of individuals, but it's like all of the nights that all of the shelters have had people staying there. So you can see for Port Orchard, they've had 260 stays so far, with an average guest count of 10 per night. They've had as few as 3 and as many as 18. In Silverdale, they've had 260 stays also, with minimum guest number of 1 all the way up to 22, with an average of. Paulsbo has had 96 total stays to date, with a guest count ranging from 1 to 8 and an average of 4. And Kingston tends to have the fewest numbers of stayers, but they've had between 1 and 5 guests, with an average of 2 for 41 stays overnight. And every single one of those stays represents essentially somebody not having to sleep outside that night. And so it's a very impactful number when you think of how much this volunteer effort has saved people from exposure and potentially freezing overnight. So we're, just extremely grateful that we work and live in a community where there are so many volunteers who are willing to come together to make this happen. And, even if we just get one person staying in a shelter, a severe weather shelter, a particular night, on one hand, it seems like a huge amount of work, right? All these volunteers, it took 6 volunteers per site to activate for that night, and just a huge amount of effort. But that one person, didn't freeze to death overnight. So it was all worth it. And that's how I feel. And we're just so grateful for all the work that they do.
Kirsten, is there a capacity?
More volunteers.
and we're definitely going to go over how to volunteer.
Yeah.
Is there, are we at capacity at the shelters? Can we take more?
Yes, all of the shelters, I believe, have not been running at capacity. It's it's been pretty rare that they run at capacity in the past. I don't have off the top of my head what the capacity is, but I know that, Port Orchard having 18, that might have put them at about capacity, but that was, only one night. And usually there's only about 10 people staying there. Kingston can definitely take more than 5. Silverdale is, again, probably 22 is around their high point, but most of the time they have quite a few less than that staying there. So we definitely have space. People should not hesitate to go to the severe weather shelters. And most of the shelters have, a provision for if, a bunch of extra people showed up that they weren't, they technically didn't have space for, they would not turn them away. They would definitely try to figure out a way to keep them inside for that night.
And I think even if that was the case, we could also transport folks to a different shelter. So
yeah,
we
absolutely.
definitely make that
We're committed
accommodation.
to basically providing housing, that overnight shelter for whoever shows up.
Kirsten, how do you interpret the data that Port Orchard and Silverdale, to have so many more stays? Do you think that's demand? I mean, obviously that can feed in kind of the narrative of having a shelter in the Pacific building down there, but how are you interpreting that kind of? I mean, that's much larger, than Poulsbo and Kingston.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, if you look at the population around those communities, it's kind of reflective of that. Kingston has a pretty small population of people. Kingston does kind of, attract potentially people from the Hansville area and Port Gamble and all of that as well, but it's just not as much population in the Kingston area. And I think that's reflective of the numbers. As well, also smaller city, not as many population, not as much population overall, whereas Port Orchard and Silverdale do have a much larger population. So I think that's probably what I would draw from that. I think, we are grateful to have these numbers because they do help us kind of gauge what the level of need is for shelter. And as you can see in Port Orchard, there is quite a need, as there is in Silverdale. I mean, not to minimize the Poulsbo and Kingston need, but there's just a higher volume of people who are looking to get into severe weather shelter on any given night in Port Orchard and Silverdale.
And with the rescue mission and the Salvation Army, shelter, that takes off some of the load. Some of the challenges on why some folks can't stay is, they don't want to separate from their belongings, right? They pretty much have all of their possessions, their tent, or I pretty much they have everything, and so that also creates an issue. Are there other barriers on why folks might not be able to stay in the shelter, or
Well, let
have
me talk
the
about the
access?
stuff issue first.
Hmm.
So we do have, we do try to let people in who have a bunch of stuff. They're asked to put their stuff in a plastic storage container for the night, and then they can retrieve that in the morning. So that's intended to reduce the barriers for people staying there. They don't have to, relinquish their stuff. They get to safely store it overnight because we recognize that that's, important to people. I think animals is another one that is, it can be a challenge. Some of the, obviously service animals are allowed, as is legally required. Some of the shelters have more flexibility with allowing animals. Some don't. Some of it has to do with what's allowed in the facility, the building itself. So I think that can be a barrier as well. Unfortunately, we haven't found a way around that yet. The transportation barrier used to be a huge issue. I think we've kind of cracked that nut, if you will, that we've got that part figured out. So that shouldn't be a barrier. And the other biggest barrier, I think, is just people finding out about it. So we have the text alerts. We, try to put the notice out by 12:30 on the day that the shelter is going to be open, so it can get announced at lunch sites and dinner sites and outreach teams. We have a great arrangement with Kitsap Transit, who's a partner in this as well. When the severe weather shelters are activated, on their bus reader boards will say severe weather shelter is activated tonight. So people, can see that as the buses are driving around all over the county. They can see that that's advertised on the bus reader boards. So that's an
That's
awesome
awesome.
way that Kitsap Transit helps us out. We advertise it on the county website. A press release goes out, a notice from Department of Emergency Management. We put it on the county website. I mean, we just try to let people know that this is happening and this resource is there. Every once in a while, there is a night where nobody will show up to a severe weather shelter. And if nobody shows up by 9 p.m., then that shelter closes for the night and everybody goes home. All the volunteers go home. So there's no use for them to sit around if nobody's actually being sheltered. But that doesn't happen too often, but every once in a while, for whatever reason, we don't have anybody show up, and that's how we handle that.
Well, Kirsten, you gave me a great idea. I'm gonna look into what it would take to outfit our vehicles with small digital reader boards, because we're all over the county. So I think that would be, pretty awesome, and not just for severe weather shelters, but other prominent information too. Um, Man,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. I
Oh,
love
that's
having
cool.
conversations.
Yeah. Cool.
So
I can stop sharing, but I don't know. Let's see. How do I?
I can do it for you
Share.
until
Okay.
you're ready. So can we get into how does someone volunteer to become a volunteer to staff the severe weather shelter?
Well, anyone can volunteer. I think the rule is that you have to be 18 or older. We have people from all ages and walks of life, from folks who have jobs that allow them to work overnight to a large cadre of awesome retired and elders that volunteer. So we're really open to taking any volunteers. If you want to volunteer, you can go on the Severe Weather Shelter website and click on the link to the application. The application itself is a Department of Emergency Management volunteer application. You just fill that out electronically, and then the DEM staff will take the application and run it through a background check. So you do have to be able to pass a Washington State background check to volunteer. Once you've passed the background check, you will get issued your emergency worker card, and you can sign up for which shelters you want to potentially volunteer at. So you can sign up at more than one shelter if you would like to. Some people do, most people do one shelter, but some people do more than that. And then the shelter manager will contact you and add you to the list of people that they contact when they are looking for volunteers to open a shelter. You will receive, we have a training video that the county has put together. So you have to watch the training video or have an in-person training that kind of covers the broad severe weather shelter rules and policies and operations. And then there's a specific to site-specific training at each of the locations as well. So you will get a training from the site manager on the specific details of working at that site. Typically, if you're a new volunteer, you'll get paired up with a very experienced volunteer for the first couple times that you are working a shift. And that's just to help on-site training. The responsibilities are pretty straightforward. There's 3 shifts. There's the first shift, which I'm going to get the times wrong, but it's I think it's like 5:30 or 5 to 10. And that shift is setting everything up, getting the cots out, preparing the beds, opening the doors, putting little sandwich boards out, that kind of welcome. And then they welcome the guests in, check everybody in, get everybody settled. Then there's a shift change. I think it's like 10 to 2. I think, and that shift is really simple. You're just literally sitting there doing a walk around the site periodically to just make sure everything's fine and everybody's doing well. You can bring a book, you can play cards, you can you're just sort of there to monitor, make sure everything's, going fine. And then there's a morning, and they, rouse everybody in the morning, kind of get everybody up, reunite people with their stuff, check people out, put the cots away, clean things up, and then, sort of shut the shelter down for the night. So, it's pretty simple. A lot of people love doing it, and we have some extremely dedicated shelter volunteers who volunteer frequently, but we always need more shelter volunteers. It's a real shame when we can't sites because we just don't have enough volunteers to make it happen.
I have a question. This might be, you might not know the answer, but this is for everyone. So it's interesting that you mentioned volunteering and background checks. For the last 2 weeks, I just got 2 background checks done for volunteering for 4-H, and I was just my daughter's in a play, and they need volunteers, so you have to do a background check to work with the kids. Do you know if it's the background checks? For one, it doesn't count against you to have a lot of background checks, I assume, but it is interesting to think that these are all individual background checks for different reasons and how long they're good for. Does anybody know that?
I believe that for the severe weather shelter program, you have to kind of re-up your volunteer application every 2 years. Like you have to get it, you have to kind of you have to sign up again. Like, yes, I want to keep volunteering. I think it's every 2 years. I don't know if they do another background check at that point. I'm guessing they do, but I don't know for sure. I don't think it counts against you to get a lot of background checks. It just means you're an awesome human who does a lot of volunteering.
Yeah, I was just like,
I don't think it hurts you.
I think the people that we work with, our clients and those who have to fill out all the forms, a lot of times it is a lot of background checks. So that's why I was curious, because it is interesting to think about that as like.
And to be honest with you, I don't even really know what the criteria is that would potentially screen you out from being able to volunteer for a severe weather shelter. The Department of Emergency Management has criteria that is set for the emergency worker program, and I don't know what that is. They're the ones who sort of decide if somebody doesn't meet the background, because I think a background check essentially will pull up any criminal history that you might have.
And what are those red flags, right?
Yeah. But I don't know, like if you had something in your background from 25 years ago and nothing since then, I don't know that would necessarily screen you out. I just don't know what the criteria is for it.
Kirsten, do you know if it's the Washington State Patrol background check?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Washington State background. So I don't know. It might be different from program to program too. Like the state emergency worker program might have one sort of like, here's what would flag you out of it. Whereas your daughter's play might have a different standard for that. Like the school districts have their own. So anyway, I'm sorry. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it is interesting to think that it probably comes up a lot because we run background checks for our program participants, but there's only certain things that we're looking for. So it's very basic, but then landlords run background checks or criminal history reports, and they're looking for other things possibly. And so it's just interesting to think about that. And anyway, it's just a paper I had to sign. It's not intensive on my part. It is just interesting how much administration goes into the background checks, even if you've done them before. Another agency needs it for another reason, so they just run another one. So
I guess what kind of comes to my mind is we use the Washington State Patrol background check too. I kind of like the fact that it's disaggregated because some folks may have a higher threshold in order to perform in that space, where others will have a lower barrier. So if it was kind of everyone goes to the same thing and then pulls it, that could be problematic unless they could go and sort through. But I think sometimes agencies can get kind of lazy and just kind of say, well, no, we're just going to reject that. So I kind of like the nuanced approach that organizations can look through and say, we don't care about that. This is all we're looking for there.
But anyway, thank you for just fielding that question.
Yeah, that's
anyway,
great.
it is interesting. Just came
One thing I wanted to just mention with my little bit of time left is that, to my knowledge, Kitsap County actually has one of the best and most robust severe weather shelter programs with 4 sites that are 100% volunteer run, especially for the size of our county. I was just seeing that the King County Regional Housing Authority operates some severe weather shelter sites as well. And I was like, that's great. I'm so happy to see that they're doing that. And like, they have like 1,000 times more resources than little Kitsap County does, So of course they have that capacity, but this program has been built by, a concern in the community for people who are living unhoused and their safety, especially at night when it's freezing. And, every once in a while people ask like, hey, can we expand this program? And, I say, well, absolutely. I don't think there's any barrier to that. It's basically a no budget, 100% volunteer effort. I mean, there is some resources that go into it. My staff time it's significant amount of staff time, and DEM donates a significant amount of staff time to it as well. So it's not like totally free, but all of the volunteering, all of the sites, we don't pay anything to rent the sites. The cots are donated. Most of the groups do a little fundraising on their own to provide some hot chocolate or some soup to people in the evenings. And I just think that's remarkable. I think that's a testament to our community and the care and compassion that people have in this community. And I'm just very proud to be part of helping it be able to function, doing our little part to support this desire by the community to make sure that people have this opportunity to be safe at night.
It reminds me of if a city was seeing a need for emergency shelter, or somebody that didn't have like a property, like a church, could they still reach out to the county and see what can be organized to I know reaching out to those who actually have the facilities is probably the easiest way to kind of get another shelter added to the program. I'm just curious, is there a direct way to get added to the program, or at least be in the discussion to add more emergency shelters?
I mean, so adding severe weather shelters, I absolutely think that's a possibility. What it takes is a dedicated organization, group, club, some organizing group has to say, we're going to take this on and we're going to be responsible for finding the space, recruiting the volunteers, doing the scheduling, all of that stuff. So the county doesn't have the resources to step in and make that happen. But if another church came forward from another community and said, we really want to have a severe weather shelter, we're really willing to offer up our building, we're willing to have enough people to do all the background work to make it happen, I think the county would be overjoyed to help support another one in the community in the same way that we support the ones that exist now. Because the awesome thing about this is that each one of those came about organically because people in their community said hey, we think we should have a severe weather shelter also. Let's figure out what that takes to do, and then approach the county. And we said, absolutely, we're happy to add you to the program, and here's what it requires, and here's the legal things you have to get in place, and here's how it works. And our severe weather shelter manager group meets once a month, shares ideas, troubleshoots issues. During the pandemic, there was a huge amount of work done to try to figure out how to do this program and help everybody stay safe from coronavirus. And that was a huge effort. We provided PPE, we've provided test kits, we, talked to the shelters about how to have the cots be distanced, how to make sure everybody wore masks. I mean, there was just a huge amount of working together to figure this out so that we could keep doing this. And so it's a great group. So yeah, if anybody out there is interested, you're welcome to talk to us and see if.
And who should they contact, Kirsten?
They can. Virginia McCaslin is the one on my staff who's the lead on the severe weather shelter program. Used to be Corey. Corey is now supporting that effort because he has so many other important projects that he's working on. But Virginia is the one who's leading that effort. And if I had thinking about it, I would have invited her to participate today. She's actually doing a monitoring, I think. She actually has some great experience with severe weather sheltering in Alaska, where she worked in a prior job. So somebody's interested, they can reach out. Oh, there's the training video that Corey put together. If you're interested in just kind of seeing how the program works, the training video is extremely comprehensive, and you can contact Virginia. Yep. Or if you have questions that I didn't answer, or more information to share or something, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm sorry, I got to jump off the call now. Thank you so much for hosting us again, Marwan, and already looking forward to the next time.
Well,
thank you, Kirsten.
I love it. Thank you for that deep dive on the severe weather shelters. Kirsten, we will see you soon. I'm sure before next month, for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm actually giving the presentation at the Housing and Homelessness Coalition this month. So I will get to share just a broad.
We'll see you next week.
Homelessness in Kitsap County and what the county is doing and all of that. So I'll see everybody there.
For sure. Thank you, Kirsten.
Bye.
Bye, Kirsten.
All right. That information is so important, and that service is so needed. So we're definitely glad to be a part of the solution there. And, you know, as I was saying at the top of the hour, the weather is supposed to dip here next week, and we've got a possibility of snow. So it is very likely that the severe weather shelter is going to be opening here in the next few days. Some other pieces that Kirsten didn't mention is the severe weather shelter is open until March 31st. And so that's how it is every year. We have mentioned it before that Salvation Army will be closing their severe weather shelter here, I believe, March 31st also. So that will change some things. But typically, that is when the weather turns and we're, outside of that window of, sub-freezing temperatures and whatnot. And while the need for people to be sheltered still remains, it's not the harshest of conditions during that time. And again, with the whole program pretty much being volunteer basis, it just becomes a matter of resources, right? What are your thoughts on kind of this presentation and learning more about the severe weather shelter and what it is and the history and how it operates? And
Want me to go, Katie?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean it's a tremendous, as I was saying earlier, it's a tremendous program, and I think Kirsten and all the volunteers and Virginia and Corey should get a lot of credit. And like Kirsten said, not every county has this. Not every county has the text and the ability to integrate some of the communication technology, and so it is huge. But I think, Marwan, the difficult thing is these are still, temporary measures, and with the Salvation Army, not for lack of want, but resources and other reasons internally, it is going to lead, especially during the summer months, right? There is going to be a still need for shelter beds. That's something our community continue, even though we have an amazing existing resources. It's something we'll continue to need to work on, is what is the long-term shelter option, right? And the severe weather shelters are always a substitute or always a supplement, right, for folks, but they're not a substitute for ongoing shelter services. And the Salvation Army does a tremendous Herculean job of being open year-round during COVID. But I think it's definitely something our community will continue to reckon with, for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Woo, man, I love the deep dives. Katie, this was your idea for the deep dives, right?
I don't know. I know we talk a lot, Marwan, these podcasts. So we always get together and we say, these are great ideas. I look forward to this because I always learn something new from Kirsten, and it's important to know about these opportunities to help those who are unhoused in a structured way, in a safe way. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this is like not managed by the county, but supported by the county, knowing that there's all of these protections in place that we can safely help. It's amazing. I love hearing about this program.
Absolutely. Well, I think you are very humble, as everyone on this panel is, doing this great work, which is fantastic. Programming note, wanted to let folks know, and I don't know if you guys know, but today G2 has turned 5 years old. So we just want to thank everyone in, 5 years of service here in Kitsap County. And we hope to continue to serve the county for years to come and increase the things that we're doing and do things better. From how we've started, we've come a mighty long way, because it started inside my house here, and it got out of my house. We got a building downtown, and now the studio's back in my house. So I guess it's just G2 is everywhere, right? The spirit exists everywhere. So it is what it is. But we wanted to, thank all the people that we've served. We want to thank, all of the organizations and individuals that have supported us. Coming on every week, every Wednesday is, you are all tremendously busy. So to carve this space out to come and provide information and dialogue is very special to me and to us. So we just wanted to thank you for that, because it could be a thing of, it'd be great, Marwan. We'd love to do it, but we're just too busy. Maybe I can give you an email with some updates and you could just share them out, yourself, but you actually carve time out of it. And the organization values it enough to say, hey, we can use time for this. So that's really important. And so from the county and Bremerton Housing Authority and KCR and the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition and all the organizations that are a part of that, G2 wants to say thank you and have you celebrate with us virtually.
Well, it's very reciprocal, Marwan. G2 fills a niche in the community that, right, this communication hub, right? How much communication about services is now on the conduit and the transportation, right? The food. It's really amazing what you do. And I can't believe it's been 5 years. I remember, I think it was the fall of 2018 when I first started as a manager at KCR. It was one of my very first team meetings that we were kind of talking about resourcing the community, and someone said, hey, there's this new gather together, grow together, giving free rides. And everyone was like, what? They're just giving away rides? And so I always remember that. You're one of the first resources that I heard about, and just as a new, kind of new on the scene. And so to see where you are now and how much you give personally, it's very reciprocal. And thank you specifically for all the work you and your team, right? Rob and everyone else that drives, I mean, it's, it's really, really something special what you all have done. And what, for the organization your size, how much you've been able to impact is amazing. So thanks for sharing that. That's awesome to be able to celebrate with you all.
I appreciate that. The hubris of offering free rides in the beginning. That was not a sustainable operation.
Yeah.
Yes, but it got you going, didn't it?
It did, right? I say it's Field of Dreams, right? Proof of concept. Like, this is a need. We feel so important about it. We're going to fund this at a loss, to get people to understand how dire the situation is in regards to transportation in the area. So,
and Katie, sure. What a marketing move, right, Katie? Like, there's no better way to generate buzz for your agency than offer a free ride, right?
I mean, yes, that is awesome. And I think it reminds me that I met Marwan last year. So it's been just over a year when I joined the podcast. And but I do remember that you did the first landlord event, like during COVID, or was it 2021? Like your first kind of conduit where it was going to be in person, and then you had to switch up real quick and make it a kind of a virtual podcast, right? Or I'm not sure the plan.
No, we did it down at the Marvin Williams Center.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. No, that was in person. There were landlords there, and KCR, Kirsten was there. Bremerton Housing Authority was there. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, the good old days, right?
Well, and again, proof of concept, right? Where you're like, when people show up, if I just say, we're going to come together for a conversation. And so to have this platform, I think a lot of community organizations need it in a way, because there's always big plans in the background. There's always lots of things going, and just somewhere to just talk about it, because they're not going to get done fast a lot of times. But it's nice to just talk about what we're planning or what we're doing, and the organizations we're working with, and because everybody needs it. It doesn't matter if we have all these big plans. Everybody still needs our services and needs to know what's going on. So we're thankful to have this platform. So,
well, I appreciate
100%
it, and
agree.
shout out to Deborah Jackson, Akuye Vargas, and Christina Rourke, because that's what made that first event happen. And that's when we met. I'd already known Christina, and then she introduced me to Deborah and Akuye. And I think within a month or so, that first uh, kind of big thing took off, and then things kind of closed down from a COVID standpoint. Then things went virtual from there, and this is what it is, and it has continued to morph. So I have a problem with mission creep, but just keep it a secret. But that is an actual thing.
But Katie,
well,
to your point. Oh, sorry, Katie. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just was gonna say, I was thinking about how many videos are on your YouTube and how you keep talking about organizing them, but that's a whole nother job.
Yes, and we are looking for funding for that, and hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel there. So we're just waiting to hear back. But so many agencies are so supportive of what we do. So,
and Marwan, isn't that, to your point, Katie? Marwan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that original landlord event was a really highly viewed video. Like, there was clearly a demand for information. I think that's probably up there in one of our, kind of the housing series, right, of being one of the most viewed. Is that still true?
well, it was, but now with the legislature and things going on, we have shows that we put out last week that have over 300 views.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, all of a sudden there's just been this big push, and shout out to Jeff. Jeff does a lot of work for us in the behind the scenes of editing long form, you know, testimonies for the legislature and cutting them down into smaller bits and city council and making those available. And so we're looking forward to doing a lot more, getting out. We were covering the Kitsap County Hispanic community meeting, last night in Poulsbo. We covered the Martin Luther King event that Ebenezer puts on this year. We're covering Tracy Flood, or Judge Flood's what does she call it? State of the Court address this Friday. So now we're doing all kinds of different things, which is really cool, and elevating other people's message and supporting their mission, which is something that's important to us too, right? Helping others do their mission better is something that is a quality that we strive for. Trainings, right? Doing the training with you.
Yep.
Now that is a very highly viewed video on what KCR does. And so you can find that on the Conduit. So that's a big one. People really enjoyed that. Like what all does KCR do? Who can
Is that
explain it
linked
to
on
me?
the KCR housing page at all?
I actually don't think it is. We need to
I
link
think we
that
should
on
put that
our.
on there. Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
I need to talk to Arbor, our media guy, and get him to link that. Yeah.
Well, we were working on
Thanks,
it. So
Katie.
Tony, how do I say that? Me, Tony, and Matt met. I'm not an English major. I teach business math. So, but we met and we're discussing, those types of things. So, but we all got busy, so we'll have to circle back to that. But I know Tony's super supportive of.
Katie, we need you to come consult for KCR. We need some communications advice. That's what we need.
Yes, I'm definitely, communications is needed everywhere. I consider myself a resource that kind of makes lots of projects. Like, oh, well, if we do this, it's a new project. It's a lot of work, but we're getting there, and I'm always happy to support. I'm glad to be on the executive committee of the coalition, because I really think we're only a piece of the puzzle, and to have communication throughout the agencies is so key. And having the coalition as a network of partners and building up that structure is so important to us as an agency as well. So.
All right. Well, I think we had a great show. I couldn't think of a better way to spend G2's birthday, but with two of my favorite agency people. So shout out for that. Anyone want the final word there?
Go ahead, Katie.
I would say the coalition meeting is next week. It's every third Wednesday, and Marwan puts it on the podcast as well. But if you want to join, go to kitsap.hhc.org, and you can sign up for our mailing list. And I believe the Zoom link to register is there as well.
Absolutely. So it's there in the bottom for you. There will be a show this evening, so stay tuned. I haven't created it. It'll be about 8 p.m., so you won't want to miss it. But otherwise, I want to thank our guests, Kirsten Jewell, Katie Sharp, and Matt Garrett for coming on today. And we will see you next Wednesday for the housing meeting. It's at 2 p.m., not 3 p.m., so don't forget. I'm R1 Cameron. This is The Conduit, everyone. All right. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.